The sound of gunfire cracked the dawn silence as Dawson Crow pushed his way through the saloon doors, his face as hard and unreadable as the rocky cliffs surrounding the small town of Golden Ridge, Colorado. The year was 1875, and like many settlements that had sprung up during the gold rush, Golden Ridge teetered between lawlessness and civilization. Dawson wasn't interested in which way it fell. He kept his gaze fixed on the dusty floorboards as he moved toward the bar, his reputation floating around him like a dark cloud that kept others at a distance. "Whiskey," he muttered, still not meeting the barkeep's eyes. The man slid over a glass without comment, having served the notorious Cowboy enough times to know better than to attempt conversation. Dawson hadn't always been this way. There was a time when his smile came easily, when he looked men in the eye with the confidence of youth. That was before the war, before the things he'd seen and done. Now, at 30 years old, he found it easier to keep his gaze lowered, to avoid seeing the judgment or fear in others' expressions. It saved everyone the trouble of pretending. The whiskey burned satisfyingly as he drank it down in one gulp. Behind him, the usual morning crowd of the Gilded Spur Saloon spoke in hushed tones. He knew they were talking about the shooting outside of town, another notch on his gun belt, another reason folks crossed the street when they saw him coming. "Another," he said, pushing his glass forward, still staring at the worn wood of the bar. "I'll have the same," came a clear, feminine voice to his right. Dawson tensed but didn't look up. Women generally didn't approach him, especially not in saloons at this hour. "You're Dawson Crow, aren't you?" she asked. He gave a barely perceptible nod, expecting her to leave once she confirmed his identity. Instead, he heard the rustle of skirts as she moved closer. "I need to hire a gun," she said matter-of-factly. "Not for hire," he answered gruffly, reaching for his freshly poured whiskey. "I can pay well," she persisted. "Not interested." There was a pause, and then, "Would you at least look at me when you refuse me?" The request was so unexpected that Dawson's head snapped up before he could stop himself. For the first time in years, he found himself looking directly into someone's eyes, a startling pair of amber-flecked green ones that belonged to a woman who couldn't be more than 25. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her face, while pretty, showed the slight weathering of someone who worked outdoors. But what struck him most was that she didn't flinch away from his gaze. There was no fear there, no judgment, just determination. "I'm Josephine Zeller," she said, holding his gaze steadily. "And I need someone who knows how to handle trouble." Dawson quickly lowered his eyes again, unsettled by the brief connection. "Find someone else." "There is no one else with your skills," she countered. "My ranch is under attack, and you're known as the best shot in 3 counties. "That's because I kill people," he said bluntly, hoping to scare her off. "That what you want? Someone dead?" To his surprise, Josephine didn't back down. "I want someone who can stop other people from dying. Someone who can protect what's mine." Her words hung in the air between them. Dawson finished his whiskey, considering. It had been a long time since he'd done anything other than drift from town to town, taking out enforcement jobs that required minimal interaction and maximum intimidation. $500, she said, placing a small pouch on the bar. "Half now, half when the job is done." The amount was substantial, enough to set him up somewhere new if he wanted. Somewhere further away from his reputation. "What kind of trouble?" he finally asked, still not looking up. "The Simmons brothers want my land. They've already killed my foreman and scared off half my hands." Her voice remained steady, though he detected a slight tremor of anger. "I inherited the ranch from my uncle 3 months ago. Apparently, the Simmons didn't think a woman alone would put up much of a fight." Dawson raised his glass for another refill. "They're right. You can't win against them. I'm not alone if you help me," she countered. He almost laughed. "One gun against the Simmons gang? That's still losing odds." "Then why are they so afraid of you?" she asked. This time, he did look up, unable to resist the challenge in her voice. Again, her gaze met his without wavering. There was something refreshing about a person who didn't cower or look away. It had been so long since anyone had really seen him. 2 weeks, he said finally. I'll give you 2 weeks. If things aren't resolved by then, I'm gone, whether you've got your ranch or not. Relief washed over her face. Thank you? Dawson grabbed the pouch of money and stood up. Don't thank me yet. Meet me outside in an hour with your horse. I want to see this ranch before nightfall. As he left the saloon, he could feel her eyes still on him, steady and unafraid. It made him uneasy in a way gunfights never did. Josephine's ranch was nestled in a valley 15 miles east of town, with mountains framing the horizon and a clear creek running through the property. Dawson could see why the Simmons would want good water, good grazing land, and positioned strategically between 2 trading routes. My uncle built this place from nothing, Josephine explained as they rode up to the main house, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch. I spent summers here as a girl, learning everything about ranching from him. When my parents died of fever last year, he was all the family I had left. Then his heart gave out this past winter. Dawson nodded but remained silent. Her personal tragedies weren't his concern. He was here to do a job, nothing more. 5 cowboys were gathered near the barn, eyeing him suspiciously as they approached. Josephine introduced them quickly, the remnants of her uncle's crew who had stayed loyal to her. This is Dawson Crow, she told them. He'll be helping us with our Simmons problem. The oldest of the bunch, a gray-haired man named Hank, stepped forward. The gunslinger from Golden Ridge? Miss Josie, are you sure about this? I'm sure we need help, she replied firmly. And Mr. Crow is the best at what he does. Dawson dismounted, still not meeting anyone's gaze directly. Show me the property lines, the spots where they've caused trouble, and anywhere they might approach from. The next few hours were spent touring the ranch's perimeter. Dawson learned that the Simmons had already poisoned part of the creek upstream, shot several head of cattle, and ambushed the former foreman when he rode out to confront them. Their own ranch bordered Josephine's to the north, making it easy for them to cause trouble and retreat to their own land. 3 brothers, Hank explained as they rode. Vernon, Elias, and Isaac. Vernon's the oldest and meanest. They've got about 15 hired guns working for them now. Dawson frowned. And they want this land bad enough to kill for it? There's rumors of silver in these mountains, Josephine said, pointing to the eastern ridge. Nothing confirmed, but Vernon Simmons has been trying to buy up all the land in this valley since last year. By the time they returned to the ranch house, the sun was setting. Josephine invited Dawson to stay for dinner, but he declined, preferring to set up a small camp near the property line where he could watch for nighttime activity. Being around people, especially one who seemed determined to look him in the eye, made him uncomfortable. Suit yourself, she said, seeming neither surprised nor offended. There's a good spot by the ridge with a view of both approaches. I'll have someone bring you food. True to her word, about an hour after he'd set up his camp, Josephine herself arrived with a plate of hot food and a pot of coffee. I thought you'd send one of your men, Dawson said, reluctantly accepting the plate. They're busy reinforcing the barn. Besides, she added, settling down on a nearby rock, I wanted to ask you something. Dawson stiffened. Personal questions were not part of their arrangement. Why don't you look people in the eye? She asked bluntly. He almost dropped his fork. That's none of your business. I'm paying you good money. I think I deserve to know something about the man I'm trusting with my life and livelihood. Dawson took a bite of the stew to avoid answering immediately. It was surprisingly good. It's easier, he finally said. Easier than what? Than seeing what's there. Fear, judgment, disgust, take your pick. He still didn't look at her as he spoke. People see the gun, hear the stories. They've decided who I am before I open my mouth. Josephine was quiet for a moment. But you looked at me today. In the saloon. You surprised me, he admitted. Because I wasn't afraid? He nodded slightly. Most people are. I've faced worse things than a man with a reputation, she said softly, My parents died slowly over weeks. I've seen cattle slaughtered by disease and good men broken by drought. A quiet man with steady hands doesn't frighten me. Dawson finally looked up at her, searching her face for the lie, for the hidden fear. But her gaze remained clear and direct. You don't know me, he warned. I know enough, she replied. You could have turned me down. You could have taken my money and run. Instead, you're here eating my stew and planning how to protect my land. That tells me something about who you are, regardless of what stories say. Before Dawson could respond, a shot rang out from the direction of the ranch house. Both of them leapt to their feet. Stay here, he ordered, but Josephine was already running toward her horse. Those are my people down there, she called over her shoulder. Cursing, Dawson grabbed his rifle and followed her. They rode hard back to the main house, where they found two of Josephine's men exchanging gunfire with unseen assailants in the tree line. Hank! Josephine called out as they dismounted behind the cover of the water trough. What happened? Simmons' men, the old cowboy replied, ducking as a bullet splintered the wood above him. Came riding and shooting. They've got Mickey pinned down in the barn. Dawson assessed the situation quickly. How many? 5, maybe 6, Hank replied. Too dark to tell for sure. Nodding, Dawson checked his rifle. I'm going to circle around. Keep them distracted from the front. I'm coming with you, Josephine said, already checking the revolver she'd pulled from her saddle bag. No, Dawson said firmly, finally looking her directly in the eyes. I work alone. Her gaze didn't waver. It's my ranch, my fight. I'm not asking permission. For a moment, they stared at each other, a silent battle of wills. Then Dawson grudgingly nodded. Stay low, stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. They slipped away from the main house, using the darkness and the buildings for cover as they made their way toward the tree line. Dawson moved silently, impressed despite himself at how well Josephine kept up, matching his movements without needing instruction. When they reached the edge of the property, Dawson held up a hand for her to stop. Ahead, they could make out the shapes of men and horses partially hidden among the trees. I count 5, he whispered. 2 by that large pine, 1 by the boulder, 2 with the horses. Josephine nodded. What's the plan? We need to draw them out or drive them off. A warning shot might scatter them. Or make them charge the house, she countered. We need to take out the leader. That one by the boulder, see the hat? That's Elias Simmons. I recognize him from town. Dawson raised an eyebrow, surprised by her strategic thinking. If I take a shot, they'll know our position. Not if I create a distraction first, she said, already moving before he could stop her. Josephine crept toward a small shed about 30 yards away, keeping low in the tall grass. Dawson cursed under his breath but kept his rifle trained on Elias Simmons, waiting. Moments later, there was a crash as Josephine pushed over a stack of metal tools from behind the shed, then darted away to another position. The noise had the desired effect. The Simmons men all turned toward the sound, guns raised. In that moment of distraction, Dawson took his shot. Elias Simmons fell with a cry, clutching his shoulder. Chaos erupted immediately. The remaining men fired wildly toward the shed while dragging their wounded leader toward the horses. Dawson took advantage of their panic to fire 2 more shots near their feet, causing the horses to rear and neigh in fear. Let's get out of here, one of the men shouted. It's an ambush. Within minutes, the Simmons gang had retreated, taking their wounded leader with them. Dawson waited until he was sure they were gone before signaling to Josephine. That was either very brave or very foolish, he said when she joined him. For the first time, he saw her smile, a genuine, exhilarated expression that transformed her serious face. It worked, didn't it? Despite himself, Dawson felt a reluctant admiration for her courage. This time. But they'll be back, and in greater numbers. Then we'll be ready, she said confidently. As they walked back to the main house, Dawson found himself occasionally glancing at Josephine's profile in the moonlight. There was something compelling about her calm determination, her refusal to be intimidated. It had been a long time since he'd met anyone like her. Back at the ranch, they confirmed that none of Josephine's men had been seriously hurt. Mickey had taken a graze to his arm, but Hank had already bandaged it. The mood was cautiously victorious. They'd driven off the attackers with minimal damage. "They'll think twice before trying that again," one of the younger cowboys said proudly. "Don't get cocky," Dawson warned. "This was just a scouting party. Next time, they'll come in force." "Then what do you suggest?" Josephine asked. Dawson considered for a moment. "We need to even the odds. How many men can you trust in town?" "Maybe 3 or 4 who worked for my uncle before and would come if I called." "Send for them tomorrow," he instructed. "And we need to fortify the approach to the house. Barricades, lookout points, escape routes if things go bad." Josephine nodded, already making mental notes. "I'll ride into town at first light." "No," Dawson countered, surprising himself with his protective instinct. "Send one of your men. You should stay here." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I can take care of myself, Mr. Crow." "It's not about that," he explained. "The ranch needs you here. Your men follow you, not me." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Hank can go." As the others dispersed to their quarters, Josephine showed Dawson to a small room off the main house where he could sleep. "It's not much, but it's better than camping out in the open." "Thank you," he said awkwardly, unused to such consideration. She paused at the door. "You know, you look at me more than you probably realize." Dawson felt a strange heat in his face. "Force of habit. I'll try not to." "I didn't say I minded," she replied with a small smile. "Good night, Mr. Crow." "Dawson," he corrected impulsively. "Just Dawson is fine." Her smile widened slightly. "Good night, Dawson." After she left, he sat on the edge of the bed, unsettled by the day's events. Not just the gunfight, which was familiar territory, but the way Josephine Zeller kept catching him off guard. The way she looked at him as if she were seeing something worth looking at. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine of preparation. Hank returned from town with 3 additional hands, all former employees loyal to Josephine's uncle. Under Dawson's direction, they built barricades, established lookout posts, and practiced emergency protocols in case of an attack. Throughout it all, Dawson found himself working closely with Josephine. She was intelligent and capable, quick to understand his tactical suggestions and unafraid to offer improvements. More disconcertingly, he found himself increasingly comfortable meeting her gaze, even seeking it out during conversations. On the 5th day, as they were reinforcing the barn doors, Josephine asked, "How did you become a gunfighter anyway? You don't seem to enjoy it much." Dawson continued hammering for a moment before answering. "I was good with a gun. After the war, there weren't many other skills that paid as well." "You fought in the war?" He nodded. "Union cavalry. Spent 3 years watching friends die and killing men I had no quarrel with." "Is that when you stopped looking people in the eye?" Dawson paused, considering the question. No one had ever asked him so directly before. "Partly. The rest came after. First job I took was protecting a mining company from strikers. Didn't know until I got there that the troublemakers were just men asking for safe working conditions." "What did you do?" "My job," he said grimly. "Scared them off, roughed up the leaders. No one died, but I saw something in their eyes when they looked at me. Made me realize what I was becoming." Josephine was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Yet you took this job. To protect, not intimidate. For the money," he corrected, though even to his own ears it sounded hollow. She smiled knowingly but didn't push further. Instead, she handed him another nail and held the board steady. They worked in companionable silence for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, as they shared dinner with the ranch hands, one of the men from town, a jovial fellow named Pete, started telling stories about Josephine's uncle. Remember that time old man Zeller caught those rustlers red-handed and made them herd his cattle for a month as punishment instead of turning them in? Pete laughed. One of them ended up working for him for 10 years after that. Josephine smiled at the memory. Uncle Edward believed in second chances. He used to say judgment was easy, but understanding took courage. Dawson felt her eyes on him as she spoke, and for once, he didn't look away. Something warm and unfamiliar stirred in his chest, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in years. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses. Immediately, everyone tensed, hands moving to weapons. Dawson was first to the door, peering out cautiously. 2 riders, he reported. Coming slow. Not looking for a fight. Hank joined him at the window. That's Sheriff Taylor from town, and looks like he's got Vernon Simmons with him. Josephine appeared at Dawson's shoulder, her presence warm and steady. Let them come. Maybe they want to talk terms. Dawson frowned. Or they're scouting our defenses. Nevertheless, they went out to meet the visitors, Dawson and the ranch hands keeping their hands near their weapons. Sheriff Taylor, a stout man with a walrus mustache, dismounted first, followed by Vernon Simmons, a tall, lean man with cold eyes and a perpetual sneer. Evening, Miss Zeller, the sheriff said, tipping his hat. Got a situation needs resolving here. If by situation you mean Mr. Simmons trying to drive me off my land by force, then yes, we do. Josephine replied calmly. Vernon Simmons spat on the ground. You shot my brother, woman. Elias might lose that arm. Your brother was trespassing and shooting at my men, Josephine countered. He's lucky to be alive at all. The sheriff held up his hands. Now. That's why I'm here. To prevent any more bloodshed. He glanced nervously at Dawson. Didn't know you had Crow working for you, Miss Zeller. Is that a problem, Sheriff? She asked. Not as such, but it does complicate matters. The sheriff cleared his throat. Vernon here has made a complaint about rustling. Says some of your cattle have his brand altered. Josephine's indignation was immediate and fierce. That's a lie. We've never stolen so much as a chicken from the Simmons ranch. Vernon smiled coldly. Sheriff's welcome to inspect your north pasture. Saw at least 20 head with suspicious brands there yesterday. Dawson narrowed his eyes. Convenient timing for such a discovery. What are you implying, Crow? Vernon demanded. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating plainly that you're trying to frame Miss Zeller because your intimidation tactics didn't work. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Well, I need to investigate the claim regardless. Planning to ride out to that north pasture tomorrow morning. We'll escort you, Dawson said firmly. First light. Vernon's smile widened. I'll bring some of my men too. For verification purposes, of course. After the visitors departed, Josephine paced the porch anxiously. They're planning something. Those cattle, if they're there at all, were planted. Dawson nodded. It's a trap. They want to get the sheriff out of the way, then make their move. What do we do? Spring the trap on our terms? Dawson replied. I'll go check that north pasture now, in the dark. If there are cattle with doctored brands, we'll know what we're dealing with. I'm coming with you, Josephine said immediately. Dawson started to refuse, then reconsidered. Actually, yes. I need someone who knows your uncle's brand inside and out. They rode out under the cover of darkness, taking a roundabout route to avoid being spotted by any Simmons lookouts. The north pasture was a half-hour's ride away, nestled against the foothills of the mountains. As they approached cautiously, Dawson spotted the cattle in question, a small herd bedded down near a stand of trees. Stay back, he whispered to Josephine. Let me check if there's anyone guarding them. He slipped off his horse and moved silently through the shadows, circling the herd. After confirming they were alone, he signaled for Josephine to join him. Together, they examined the nearest steer by moonlight. See here? Dawson pointed to the brand on its flank. Your uncle's Z inside a circle, but someone's added lines to make it look like an S inside a square, the Simmons brand. Josephine's face tightened with anger. They did this today, after the shooting. These are my cattle. And now we have proof of their scheme, Dawson said. But that doesn't solve our immediate problem. Vernon will have men positioned to ambush us when we bring the sheriff here tomorrow. So we move the cattle, Josephine suggested. Drive them back to the main herd tonight. Dawson considered this. Too risky. They might have someone watching. I have another idea. At dawn, Sheriff Taylor arrived with Vernon Simmons and 4 of his men. Dawson, Josephine, and 3 of her hands were waiting for them. Let's get this over with, the sheriff said, clearly uncomfortable with the tension between the two parties. They rode to the north pasture, where the cattle still grazed peacefully. Vernon pointed triumphantly to the nearest steer. There! See that brand? It's been altered! The sheriff dismounted to inspect the animal. That does look suspicious, he admitted. May I? Dawson asked, joining them. He knelt by the steer and rubbed at the brand with a wet cloth he'd brought along. To Vernon's visible shock, part of the brand smeared away, revealing the original Z in circle underneath. Interesting how fresh this altered brand is. Almost like it was done yesterday. That's impossible, Vernon sputtered. You're trying to trick us. The trick was yours, Vernon, Josephine said coldly. And we caught you in it. Sheriff Taylor's face darkened with anger. Vernon Simmons, did you falsify evidence to frame Miss Zeller? Vernon's response was to reach for his gun. Before he could draw, Dawson had his own weapon out and aimed steadily. I wouldn't, Dawson warned, looking Vernon directly in the eye. For once, he wanted someone to see the threat in his gaze, to understand just how serious he was. Vernon slowly moved his hand away from his gun. This isn't over, he growled. Actually, it is, the sheriff declared. Vernon Simmons, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted fraud and filing a false report. Your men can ride on home and tell your brothers that if I see any of you on Zeller land again, you'll all be joining Vernon in jail. As the sheriff led a fuming Vernon away, Dawson turned to find Josephine watching him with a curious expression. What? He asked. You looked him in the eye, she observed. Directly, without hesitation. Dawson holstered his gun. I wanted him to know I meant business. And do you ever look at me that way? Like you mean business? There was a hint of teasing in her voice. To his surprise, Dawson felt himself smile slightly. No. With you it's different. Her eyes softened. Different how? Before he could answer, one of her hands called out urgently. Miss Josie! Riders coming from the east, lots of them. Dawson's instincts kicked in immediately. Get back to the ranch. Now! They rode hard, but the approaching riders, at least 10 of them, were coming from the direction of the ranch, cutting off their direct route. This way, Josephine called, veering toward a narrow canyon to their right. There's another way through. Dawson and the others followed her lead, galloping into the rocky passage. Behind them, they could hear the pursuing riders. Elias and Isaac, Dawson guessed grimly. Making their move while Vernon had us distracted. The canyon narrowed further, forcing them to slow to a trot. Ahead, Josephine pointed to a fork in the path. Right fork leads back to the ranch. Left goes up into the hills. Split up, Dawson decided quickly. You men take the right fork, get back and warn the others. Miss Zeller and I will lead them left, away from the ranch. The cowboys nodded and spurred their horses down the right path. Dawson and Josephine took the left, climbing steadily into rougher terrain. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. They're gaining, Josephine warned, glancing back. Just a little further, Dawson urged. He'd spotted a defensible position ahead, a narrow ledge overlooking the path they were on. There! We can make a stand there. They dismounted quickly and secured their horses, then climbed to the ledge with their rifles. They'd barely taken position when the first of the Simmons men rounded the bend below. Hold your fire, Dawson whispered. Let them bunch up. Josephine nodded, her rifle steady in her hands. Dawson found himself admiring her calm in the face of danger. She was unlike any woman, any person he'd ever known. The riders slowed, clearly realizing they'd lost sight of their quarry. Elias Simmons, his arm in a sling, gestured for his men to spread out and search. That's when Dawson fired his first shot, deliberately striking the ground near Elias's horse. The animal reared in panic, nearly throwing its injured rider. That's far enough, Simmons, Dawson called out. Next one won't miss. Elias cursed loudly. Crow! We've got you outnumbered. But outgunned, Dawson replied calmly. I count 8 of you in easy rifle range. How many do you think I can drop before you reach cover? The men shifted uneasily, clearly familiar with Dawson's reputation. This doesn't concern you, Crow, Isaac Simmons shouted. This is between us and the Zeller woman. You made it my concern when you started shooting at people under my protection, Dawson answered. Josephine spoke up then, her voice clear and confident. Your brother Vernon is in custody, Simmons. The sheriff knows about your schemes. It's over. Elias laughed bitterly. It's not over until we say it's over. Your uncle stole that land from our father years ago. That's a lie, Josephine retorted. My uncle bought that land fairly. He has the deeds to prove it. Deeds can be forged, Isaac sneered. Enough talking, Dawson cut in. You have 2 choices, ride away now and live, or push this fight and die here. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Elias nodded to one of his men, who slowly reached for something in his saddlebag. Dawson tracked the movement carefully, ready to fire if needed. Instead of a weapon, the man produced a white handkerchief, which he tied to his rifle barrel and raised high. Let's talk terms, Elias called up. No need for more bloodshed. Dawson glanced at Josephine, who nodded slightly. Throw down your guns first, he demanded. After some grumbling, the Simmons men complied, dropping their firearms to the ground. Now what? Josephine whispered to Dawson. Now we negotiate from strength, he replied, then called down. Here's the deal, you leave Miss Zeller and her ranch alone. All claims, all threats, all harassment stops today. In return, she doesn't press charges against you for the brand tampering and the attacks. Elias scowled. And my brother Vernon? That's between him and the sheriff, Josephine answered. But I'll put in a word if you agree to our terms in writing, with witnesses. The brothers conferred briefly, then Elias nodded reluctantly. Fine. We'll sign whatever you want. But this isn't over, Zeller. Yes, it is, Dawson said firmly, finally standing to his full height on the ledge, his rifle aimed steadily. Because if you ever threaten Miss Zeller again, I won't be giving warnings. Do we understand each other? The look that passed between them was clear. For once, Dawson's reputation worked in his favor. Elias Simmons knew a deadly promise when he heard one. We understand, Elias muttered. The next day, in the sheriff's office in Golden Ridge, the Simmons brothers signed a formal agreement renouncing all claims to the Zeller ranch and promising to cease all hostilities. Vernon was released with a warning, and the 3 brothers left town immediately, heading west toward new opportunities in Nevada, according to rumor. As Dawson and Josephine rode back to the ranch, a comfortable silence stretched between them. The afternoon sun painted the landscape in gold, highlighting the beauty of the land they'd fought for. 2 weeks isn't up yet, Josephine said finally. But I suppose your job is done. Dawson nodded slowly. Seems that way. Will you be moving on then? Finding another town, another job? He didn't answer immediately, considering her question seriously. The thought of returning to his solitary existence, drifting from place to place, no longer held the same appeal. Something had changed in these past days, or perhaps, something in him had awakened after a long dormancy. What would you say? He began carefully. If I wanted to stay? Josephine reined her horse to a stop, turning to face him fully. "I'd say I need a new foreman. Someone who knows how to handle trouble and isn't afraid to look problems in the eye." Dawson met her gaze steadily, no longer uncomfortable with the connection. And if the foreman wanted something more, eventually? If he found himself thinking about the ranch owner in ways that went beyond employment? A smile bloomed on her face, radiant and open. "I'd say he should tell her directly. She appreciates straightforward communication." Dawson felt an answering smile form on his own lips, rusty from disuse but genuine. "Josephine Zeller, I think I'm falling in love with you. And I'd like to stay if you'll have me." "Dawson Crow," she replied, her eyes shining. "I think I started falling for you the moment you first looked me in the eye in that saloon. And yes, I'll most definitely have you." He dismounted and moved to help her down from her horse. As her feet touched the ground, he kept his hands at her waist, drawing her closer. For the first time in years, Dawson felt the walls around his heart crumbling away, replaced by something warm and hopeful. "I'm not an easy man," he warned softly. "Old habits die hard." "I don't want easy," she replied, reaching up to touch his face gently. "I want you exactly as you are." When their lips met, Dawson closed his eyes, surrendering to the moment. But when they parted, he immediately sought her gaze again, unwilling to miss a single expression that crossed her face. In the years that followed, the Zeller Ranch, eventually renamed the Zeller Crow Ranch, prospered under their joint care. Dawson never fully lost his watchful nature, but he did lose his reluctance to connect. The man who once couldn't look anyone in the eye became known throughout the county for his direct and honest dealings. And if sometimes visitors to the ranch were startled by the intensity of his gaze when Josephine entered a room, or by the open affection between them as they worked side by side, no one commented on it. They simply nodded in understanding, for it was plain to see that Dawson Crow had found in Josephine Zeller's fearless eyes not just love, but home.